Paula, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is there an echo? I just heard an echo. Matt, are you there?
Yeah, we're trying
When you speak, I just hear an echo. Is that normal?
We're trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Else is on there.
All right, Tim, testing.
Yeah, I can without it.
Okay, perfect. We got it.
Okay.
Hey, Tim. Oh, you're in St. George.
You're faking me out, Doug.
No, I know I'm not, but how did it go today?
Very good. It's been a good conference the last 2 days. So I've enjoyed it and
That's good.
things are good. Look forward to having all of you come on Thursday or Wednesday.
Manana.
Yeah, Wednesday.
So wait, yeah, tomorrow.
Yep. How are things there? Has the weather been decent?
It's getting a little bit blustery. It's got the dust in the sky. It's kind of moving the air's moving pretty good. You can tell we've got a front coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it'll rain right after we wash our cars, so it's all good.
I know, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like clockwork.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's spring. Holy cow, what are you doing? Thought you're gonna pull in that logo on the Cottonwood Heights. Oh, man.
Hi, Sean. I see you as well.
Yes, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
Hey, Tim.
What's the temp there?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you.
But it was 83
Yeah.
yesterday, and I haven't been outside much today, but it's about 83, 84. Really nice.
Wow.
It's gonna get into the 70s here in a couple of days. Once we get there, it'll cool off.
That'd be fine. It's a little warm.
Yeah, no, I'm good. It was 70 something, what, yesterday was 73 or 4, and then it's not bad. We'll take it.
Yeah.
But is it windy there?
No, well, a little breezy, but someone said that the wind was supposed to come in here tonight,
Right.
so we'll see.
Well, it's springtime in the Rockies.
Yeah, a little hazy today. I mean, just a little bit of overcast, not much, but a little bit.
Yeah, you're seeing a little bit of what we've got.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a busy night tonight.
I agree.
Not sure what to do with having to move this chair.
Yeah. We need a cardboard cut out of Tim we could put up there.
I might go better.
Maybe have the mouth move on it, you know, one of those. The magic of Zoom, huh?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. You remember, Doug, wasn't it a year ago? No, was it a year ago? No, it was probably in February where we were all on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
February a year ago.
Most of since I was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the norm to me, but
Yeah,
we met a couple times before it shut down.
yeah.
I had COVID pretty bad anyway. I had to travel to go get it.
Yeah.
It looks like they've eased some of the mask mandates on some of the airlines and airports and things.
Yeah, I've seen that. Seen that they've done that.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll hold. Feeling a lot better after that Diet Dr. Pepper, don't you?
It's gone, I'll feel better.
How many, is that really 0 calories?
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. Because the other one's like, how many calories is one?
A can, probably 120,
50?
150, something like that, probably.
What do you have to be afraid of that? The aspartame?
No, it's there's been so many studies and they haven't said.
Gotta figure it
So
out.
one of the things that they say is aspartame, it gives you a sense of fulfillment for a really short time. So in a half an hour, you might be hungrier than you were if you're drinking a lot of diet soda. So it actually makes some people eat more, but it doesn't do that to me.
Huh. Well, as much as I love Dr. Pepper, I can only drink them on special occasions. Because I could pound those suckers down. But I can't. Yeah. Sometimes I want a little burn, to feel the burn. Yeah.
Hello there. Good. How are you?
Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. Hi,
How are
Sharon.
you?
You ready for tomorrow?
Sean's never
Yeah.
forgiven you because he remembers that you actually went up in the bird's nest, and messed with the birds.
Thank you.
You're unmuted.
Or is he with Tim?
No, he's
Oh, I've seen him.
All on my side is recording.
You ready?
3:59 on my phone, so we're close.
Love that punctuality.
I like starting and stopping meetings on
Well, I
time.
love that particularly. Oh,
With an atomic clock city.
Started this thing.
all right.
Mayor, I'm gonna say hi to everyone so they know I'm here.
Oh, we see
Oh,
you,
hi,
Tim.
Tim.
You're
Oh,
about
yeah,
that
there he
big,
is.
so it's good to see you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mayor Mike Wickers. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022, and this is the work session for the Cottonwood Heights City Council. The first item on our agenda is actually a review of our business meeting agenda this evening, which is chock full, if you've had a chance to look at that. So we will begin our meeting tonight, like always, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Our esteemed Public Works Director, who I don't see yet, Matt Shipp, is going to lead us in the pledge tonight. The next item this evening will be a proclamation, which I'll be able to read, which I think is a really good thing, which is going to be recognizing the life and contributions of Don J. Anzac, who has obviously played a big part in our city being incorporated in the parks and recreation facilities that we enjoy. We will have a citizen comment period. We're actually expecting there might be quite a few comments on a multitude of issues tonight. We'll see how that goes. And then we will have our standing quarterly reports. First, we'll have our finance and administrative and financial services director, Scott Jurgis, will give us a report, and then we will turn to our esteemed assistant chief Riley Pilgrim from UFA will give us a report tonight that we're excited to hear. So, and then this evening we will we have a long list of legislative items to consider. The first of which is going to be consideration of ordinance 379-A or 379-D, and 379-A will be approving a general plan amendment for the 0.95 acre realty at 3526 East Fort Union Boulevard from residential office to residential medium density. The or will be consideration of ordinance 379-D, which is denying the general plan amendment for that same property from residential office to residential medium density. So because this will not be something we will discuss on our staff report, I'm going to talk about this right now and give you a little bit of background about where we are. We've actually been able to talk about this before in a couple of our work sessions. One of the things that has been really helpful to us has been all of the public input that has come. We've had residents come in and ask for meetings to talk with us. We've received emails, phone calls. We had 90 people sign a petition. So I think one of the things that allowed us to do as a council was to understand the importance that this request had to our citizens. And so I think we've all listened, and I think we've all looked at the issues. And I'm going to raise, if you don't mind, some of the things that we've actually considered as we've looked at this ordinance change. Number one that I want to bring up, in the land use change that we did in 2019 actually indicates in the eastern portion of Fort Union Boulevard, it designates it as a transitional area of that road that doesn't really fit the character of the rest of Fort Union Boulevard. Whereas, all you see basically are single family homes. The other point that I wanted to bring up is the update we are currently going through an update to our general plan. So we've had a meeting where we've invited citizens to come. We're going to have more meetings where citizens will come in and provide updates to our general plan. And so one of the things that we've looked at is it premature at this stage when we're going through a general plan update to actually issue a zone change to a section to a section of a road where we're currently taking input and looking at possible changes. And so that actually is a really important factor from what we've taken into consideration. Another item that we've looked at is the growth and development patterns that have changed drastically in recent years, and which have made us take caution about any land use changes. And that's one of the things that we've talked about and looked at. And then the last item that I want to bring to everybody's attention is, the affordable housing is something that as a council, we really want to look forward to or need to take into consideration as we look at land use. And as we had the opportunity to have the developer or the applicant, I guess I should say, come in and speak to our council last week, he mentioned that these would be high-end twin homes that really would not address affordable housing at all on that location. And so at this point, I want to open it up to the council for comments and questions. How you all feel about this request to the ordinance change. And Shane, did you have something?
I would just, I think I would just note that the discussion during the work session is great, but a similar discussion would need to be had on the record in the business meeting. So
Tim and I talked about that, so we will repeat that.
Okay.
Yep.
You mentioned we did this general plan amendment for everything east of 27th East on Fort Union Boulevard in
2019.
Okay, so I mean, that's been fairly recent. I was the only one that was actually on the council at that time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought we handled it. We changed it down from what it had been from when we first did it in 2006. And it was basically mixed use and a lot more, not probably taking as much into consideration the difference in Fort Union east of 27th as it was west.
Right.
I mean, I still feel like we did a fairly good job of that. This, to me, at least the land use part, the 379A or D, is, I don't know what I would probably say is a lighter intensity request, which is typically something that is quite favorable. In this case, there's been people expressed disagreement with that. But I certainly see, your point that we're doing a general plan use. This is certainly a place that would take that. It's interesting that it's a less intense request for the land use. But then in the end result on the zone changes to get a smoother or more direct application for twin homes. So,
yeah.
And while honestly on the zone request itself, I think the building envelope difference between the R1 and R2 is probably a lot less significant than most people would think. But I spent some time on the phone this morning with Mr. Johnson and Councilmember Burrell asking a lot of questions. So like I say, as far as the land use, I mean, like I say, there's 4 new people on that particular land use. What you feel about that may be different than my perspective. Because I've been through 2 land uses on these particular properties already.
Yes, and I will say that you touched on a number of items that residents are deeply concerned about. And, you know, one of them is setbacks. And so I think the residential office is more favorable to the kind of setbacks that they want to see, especially in the sides and the, you know, rear of the house. And so I think that's could be a key consideration for us to help protect the surrounding single-family residences. I also, of course, my District 4 would like there to be an emphasis on the eastern portion of Fort Union Boulevard east of 2700 East, remaining as much, keeping the integrity of that single-family residential feeling. We have our commercial district, and then we, according to the Fort Union Boulevard Master Plan, we're trying to get a Main Street feeling in the section, let's just say the central or the center section, not at the west end and not at the east end. And so I'm in favor of providing more affordable housing. And I think that distinction is very important. If housing is going in that's more dense and yet it's either apartments that then limit people of middle and lower socioeconomic levels from ever realizing the benefit of home ownership, or if it's condominiums or townhomes that are above the median income, I mean, above the reach of average citizens, then I think that really deserves our full scrutiny. So I'm glad that we're having this discussion.
Great. Any comments?
Yeah, just, you know, and I don't have an awful lot to say, but I'm also concerned about the concerns of the residents in that area. A lot of it has to do with the aesthetic shift that will take place with those types of structures being built there. And also the access to Fort Union. You know, what type of traffic are we looking at? How much traffic? If we're increasing vehicles, be it, you know, single family would be 3 vehicles maybe, and duplexes and so forth at 6. We're looking at 6 or maybe even more vehicles. So those are some of the concerns that I have. But I think we just need to make sure that we're vetting this in the proper way and looking at all the variables so that we don't run into any issues in the future when we're looking at pieces of property that are trying to do the same thing. And I think we've done that. We've taken a really close look at it, and I feel comfortable with moving forward and making a decision for this evening.
Okay, awesome, great. Thank you, Sean. Doug, any comments?
I have many of the same concerns about, I know that Scott Bracken was the only one here that when they did the master plan change and decided on that. And after a lot of study, talking to a lot of people in the neighborhood up in there, based on everything that you mentioned, oh, the phone. I think based on the mayor's findings and comments that I move to approve 379D.
We'll consider that in the
After that,
business
down the road.
Yeah, in the
but
business. So like Shane said, we'll have this same discussion really again in the business meeting. It's important.
I think that it does have a lot to do with what 90 neighbors in that area have to say.
Yeah.
I do understand that it is a major corridor, understand that. I know down the Highland Drive on our side, they've tried to limit the number of ingress egress on that busy road because it's difficult to come in and out. Even some of the businesses that we've had, had to do a turnaround so that they can get out there safely. Yeah. And if they're safe, you're coming out nose front. You're not backing into the road.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a lot better situation for for a private residence personally. But that's my opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you all. we'll have this discussion again in not too long, and then we'll vote. So, so I mentioned that the first thing that we will consider is ordinance 379-A or D, and depending upon how we vote there, the next item tonight is 6.2, which is ordinance 380-A or D. And if we do go to 379-D, we will actually, that will notify, actually, maybe I should let Shane talk about that.
Yeah, the zoning classification has to be based on the appropriate land use classification, and so 380A, changing it to R28 wouldn't be supported by the current land use. So in other words, if 379A is approved, why the land use has changed, well, then you can go on to 380 and decide whether or not to do A or D on the rezone. But if 379D is approved, in other words, keeping the land use the same, denying the request to change the land use, the general plan designation, why then it would be inappropriate for you to consider ordinance 380 because it isn't. It wouldn't be supported by an approval wouldn't be supported by the land use designation.
Great. Thank you, Shane.
Let me ask one more.
Yes.
Did we look on the zoning conditions, setbacks, one of the items that is on that?
You know, I neglected to look at that. I went to Las Vegas instead. I will look at that between now and
If you could
okay.
quickly, and then let me know, because that seems to be one of the significant issues.
So I thought, Mike, we looked at that, and the setbacks in R28 is less than they are for R21, right?
For R1,
R1.
side setback, it's a couple feet difference,
Yeah, you've got 3 feet. You could be 3 feet closer on a side yard.
5 to 8.
My question was, we have, as part of our code, zoning conditions. I didn't know, I know height is one, overall density is another. I didn't know if setbacks, specific setbacks were something that was addressable with a zoning condition.
Right.
So the side setbacks would be, we know what those would be in.
On an R1, it's
R1.
20 feet, and then you can move up, a little bit side to side, have a minimum of 8 on one side, but then you have 12 on the other. On R2, you have to have 15 total, and you can go down to 5 and 10. Or 10 and 5.
And the max height would still be
Still 35.
35.
Unless, again, you put a condition on it, but I have a hard time thinking of any reason you'd have to go less than that when everyone else is 35. You'd have to have a really good other
Reason.
I would have to have another good reason to, limit someone's height. Just, I don't know, maybe they're in a low fly zone.
So Shane, let me ask you this question, sorry, procedurally. Do we decide now that we're going to go to A or D?
No.
Okay, we'll do that.
No,
this evening.
we'll do that in the meeting. It would be inappropriate to do that here. So you can discuss it as you have, and then
Okay.
you'll need to have a discussion again in the business meeting.
Okay, great. So item 6.3 tonight will be consideration of ordinance 381, amending code chapter 11.22, considering the permanent parking program. Our economic and community development director, Mike Johnson, I'll let you talk about that real quick.
Yeah, just really quick, we, as discussed last time, we proposed removing the portion of that ordinance that allows for the creation of new permanent parking ordinances, or permanent parking areas, I should say. So it eliminates the petition process. It actually also eliminates the council's ability to do that. We can still impose no parking anytime, or things that are equal for everybody using a road. But the permanent parking would go away, and it becomes more just an ordinance that administers the existing legally created permanent parking areas. So they can keep going. They would be allowed to carry on in perpetuity. The council can still amend those following a procedure. But the big change is it would be no new permit parking areas, or this petition process would go away.
Great. Any questions? I know we've discussed this multiple times. So the next item this evening we'll consider is consideration of ordinance 382, amending code chapter 14.12 concerning roadway design. And I'll actually have our public works director, Matt Ship, to address that for us.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. This is the section of the code. I'm fairly positive Shane has made sure I haven't done anything wrong by writing up the resolution. But this is section 14.12.090 of the city code, which deals with roadway design. One of the issues that came up a couple of councils ago was council was concerned about the design speed that's written in the code. Through a little research and looking into it, we have found through AASHTO, which is our design standard, a way to change change the design speeds. We're using, and in the report you'll see it, we're using both functional classification as well as contextual classification on our roads in order to do this. And they give a range in AASHTO, the design standards, which allows us to design at different speeds. And if you'll see it in the, like I said, in the report, there are some ranges on those design speeds. But since the original code was calling out one design speed, we've chosen to eliminate the range and call out a maximum design speed that will allow for our roads when it comes to design. Now, based on that, we've also classified some roads in here. Those classifications are going to be coming up, are also in the transportation master plan that you will be reviewing and going through in a couple of council meetings. So I guess that is what I have on this. I had a real genius idea and it slipped my mind, so I won't even try to come up with it again. But anyway, this is what we're proposing to you as a council. And there will be, like I said, there's other changes that are coming forward. I remember what it was. I wanted to make sure we were clear. But there are other changes that will be coming forward on section 19 of code, section 9 of this chapter. But that will be coming forward with the transportation master plan review. Just for information purposes, again, just want to clarify, changing of the design speed as it is existing does not change posted speed limits. Okay, when we're talking about traffic calming, we're talking about a different standard for existing roads. That's capital projects. That's things we have to review as those things happen. So this new roads or redesigned roads, this will take effect, which will lower the speeds based on what we put in the design. That is this intention, but it does not change what's existing now. That's a whole different process that needs to be followed.
What constitutes a redesign?
If we go to reconstruct a road, for instance, for any purpose, as a council and we decide we want to just redesign the road, in other words, put in bump outs, if you will, chicanes, raised crosswalks, just various hardscape items that narrow the focus of drivers to the road and not just eyes wandering, if you will, traffic calming, that's when we can do those things. When we get around to, and we're talking about Fort Union, up here on the east end of Fort Union, one of the things we're looking at is, reconstructing that and making it, adding some things. We've applied for the funding. We didn't get it. We've talked about that, but if it ever comes up, that could be a section of road that could be theoretically redesigned. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to change the horizontal and the vertical alignments to do it, but we can come in with traffic calming and do those things. So redesign really is a matter of, do we want to expend the funds to redesign a road? And when we do, we have to follow these speed standards that are set. So just clarify that as traffic calming versus design speed.
Great.
And so with your schedule to rework the surface, the road surfaces, and some are going to get a much deeper fix, so to speak, than others will be a more light resurfacing. And so with the roads, especially that require, deeper work on them, can that then be part of the council's consideration toward traffic calming measures,
Sure.
et cetera? And how far out do you have that plan thus at this time?
We will be coming back to you with a new 5-year plan
5 years.
this next budget year. We're coming into the 5th year. So we'll be coming back to you with a new 5-year plan. To answer your question, yes, it can be considered. The other consideration is the finite funding that we have. If we can spend a lot of money on one road, or we can spend, we can try to divvy those funds out. At any point in time, as a council, if you decide you want to do a traffic calming project on a particular road, we would be instructed, we'd go get, what needs to be done, give you cost estimates, and then you would vote on that capital project. So it really is a matter of funding when we talk about that. Our reconstruction we're looking at is a cross-sectional reconstruction, trying to salvage and save, repair, or bring back to life the actual asphalt section. I have not proposed any changes to traffic calming on any roads as they exist. There are a few in the city. I'm going to mention, bring them up right now. In particular, there are a handful of roads that could use some working for traffic calming, and those will come up, and we'll talk about them through the capital process. But yes, anytime you want, we can look at it.
So
your
great points. And let me just add to it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. So we've done a study of road condition that gives a PCI grade.
Correct.
For that stretch of road. If the road meets a certain minimum, then we will, if we slurry seal, we can actually lengthen the life of that road. If the grade is too low, doing for example, a slurry seal won't actually fix the road, and that is when we will look at replacing it. Right?
Yeah, and it's basically throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing we would propose. We do have roads we have pulled off of our slurry projects because they're too far gone. Yeah. And they wait a few more years. They're not going to get any worse. I mean, so we can wait a few years as we kind of work through the program. And that's what you're going to see on the next 5 years. I think we've discussed it with this council, or was it the previous one we talked about it?
We did a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, the next 5-year plan is less heavy maintenance, and it's gearing more towards reconstruction and depth reconstruction, not realignment.
That was my question, is when you go to the end of the, when is the end of our 5 years up? What month?
We have the, July, we started, it's on the fiscal year. Well, we were running the fiscal year, so we're finishing year 4.
So we still have a
We're
whole
jumping
other
in year 5 coming up.
And that varies after the end of that, we'll know before that.
Yeah, I'll have, during this next fiscal year,
Right.
I'm hoping obviously this summer, maybe even sooner before the start, I'll have part 2, a 5-year program for you to review and make comment on. And I've presented a preliminary, I believe it was to the other council just before they left, but I presented a preliminary at that time.
Okay, did I miss a map in here, or it's not?
There is no map, no. This
Okay.
is not, sorry, it might have, I did a cut and paste job on this one. So if it's written in there, I presented a map. I apologize on that.
No,
What's important is this one, the ordinance itself, so.
which is what I'm looking at, and then there's I understand what a local road is, and that's basically not changing. That's 25. I get I'm curious, give me examples of the other 3: urban collector, urban arterial, and urban core.
Your urban core is your Fort Union out here, where your core is basically your business type districts. Everything is a core. This is your city. So this is your arterials through those areas. Okay, so Highland, the intersection of Highland and Fort Union, 1300 over in that area. Those 27th is considered to be 27th, 30th, 2300. Those are considered your collector areas. The urban collectors. Now your arterials going down Highland, going south down Highland, that's more of an arterial, and it's coming out of the course area. So you have Highland.
Out of the
Highland? Yeah, I'm thinking of Highland. You're giving me a look and I'm thinking I'm lost. So I apologize.
I mean, the way at a core arterial tends to be more intense. I guess
Yeah, but you got to remember, core, the function of an arterial is to carry volume. And we're adding core to it so we can slow down that speed because it has more approaches, more accesses onto it. So it's the core area, but it's still, its purpose is to carry the volume. So it's labeled, it's identified functionally as an arterial, but it's in an urban core area.
Yeah, I guess having done a number of road redesigns and getting literally millions of dollars from the legislature and other places to do some of those things, just to do the basics. I see, are these mandated?
I guess I don't understand the question.
I mean, if we go to resurface and rebuild, and from what you're saying, we're doing a surface core down on Highland Drive, or then we mandated to redesign it at this way and add those things in there?
This does not mandate reconstruct. This does not mandate changing the existing design. This is for any designs, any roads that come into the city, or if we redesign, for instance, like I said, if we go down east of Fort, this is the only one I can think of right now off the top of my head, because we're looking at bike lanes, trails, and the asphalt width through there. That's a redesign. It's not really changing a whole lot in the vertical or the horizontal alignment. It's more of a cross-sectional alignment.
But if we go to do that redesign, are we then looking at ways to it? I guess I'm a little concerned with the maximum being 30 on a core arterial and a collector. I mean, we already have a lot of streets that are in the city that are in excess of that could at some point come up with a redesign. And so that's the question, is it mandated that we go to that design and incorporate items to change it so that it matches this?
That was,
Yes.
yes, that was one of my concerns when we did this, if you'll recall, that it could have some ramifications. Right now, it does not have any, because we don't have an intention of changing any design on the roads. It's just not there. We're not going to, for instance, go out on Bengal Boulevard and design Bengal at 25 miles an hour
Sounds
and
good
then
to
have
me.
to change everything.
Well,
It's that you're talking about.
It does sound
posting.
good. What the problem is it sounds like literally tens and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes,
And
you are
that's where I.
If we choose, if the city chooses to go in and say, we are going to redesign this to the speed limit, yes, it's going to cost a fortune to do something like that, because you do have to change things. That is for sure. This is for new roads coming in the city. This is for new design, if you will, if we want to redesign a road. And right now, like I said, and not even sure I'd consider it a redesign on Fort Union East down this way, but I would design it such that if we were to put those lanes in, and that would be more traffic calming designs that would go into that.
Well,
at
as
that time.
things stand now, we could certainly say we want to put this road in, we're gonna change it, and we want you to design at this level.
Yes, you could.
We could always do that on a case-by-case basis
Yes, you
going
could.
forward.
That is correct.
And with this in there, can we then say, well, 35 is not gonna be sufficient here, we really need to design this at 40.
Yes, there is the ability to use judgment and engineering judgment on that, sure. Yes, that does exist.
Wasn't one of the purposes of this to bring a more systematic safety to the roadways of Cottonwood Heights? So I don't understand why we would redesign and at higher speeds than are listed in this document. What weight does this carry if a council can vote to override on a given, road that has one of these designations? That I'm not quite clear.
I don't want to put Shane on the spot. I don't
The
know.
council can always change.
Thank you.
Subject-
I mean, that's
I didn't want to say
Councils.
that.
No, can't bind them.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
Everything is
Yes.
always subject to change.
All right.
But this is meeting what was asked at the time for the design speed. That was an important change. And this is the way we found to be able to do this. To answer your question, yes, if you as a council come in and say, we don't like the alignment of Bengal Boulevard, we want it to go around something,
Or we got a
Then
$10
I
million
have
grant
to-
to redo it, we could say.
then I have to redesign it to the new standard. That is correct. Unless there is something that just says it needs to be designed this way, but we would follow this standard. Correct.
This part with, and part of it would be, that's why I asked you for the examples. I really would have to kind of see a map, but I probably would lean more towards doing that on a case-by-case basis rather than, especially if it's something that's at. There is a lot of, there's a huge amount of funding in there. I think that just really needs to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis when we get to a project. Because when we got $2 million to redo Bengal a number of years ago, we had hoped, we actually went through and we said, well, these are all the things we would love to do to Bengal to make it better. We need to cover these things up, put the bike lanes in and do all these things. And we figured, and we actually got a grant. We've got $2 million to do this, only to find out when the bids went out, that barely covered getting asphalt and some of the understructure done. And we didn't get any of the extras. And so
Scott, kind of what this was meant to do, and I think most of us were in agreement. We wanted some language in our code that said, hey, if we're going to redesign a road, that we want to base it, we want a design that is based on traffic calming and that with lower speeds. And so I think, we're in a mostly built out city. We're probably not going to have a lot of opportunity, but at least we are saying if we get the opportunity, that's going to be important to us.
Well, what I heard Matt say though, is that there's certainly a lot more opportunity than I was thinking if it gets down to where we're doing
I didn't get that from Matt,
as
but-
being.
No, it's not. This has nothing, the reconstruction that we're talking about on the 5-year plans are maintenance. They really are maintenance
I
reconstruction.
understand that, but
It's if you want to come in and change an alignment of a road as a council, you don't like the fact that it's going, past a certain place, you want it to go around, then yes, we would have to follow this. To go in and just to reconstruct a cross section, a depth cross section, and to make the asphalt last longer doesn't qualify under this standard. This standard takes into account when you talk about design speed, you start with how fast do you want the driver to go. Then you take geometry in question.
I understand that. So and that's what I'm trying to find is, because what you had said, what I understood originally is this is certainly a lot broader. we aren't a built-out city.
Then I apologize if I came across that way. I don't mean for, I've always said, we are a built-out city. This does not affect what we have out there unless we decide to do something different.
But if we
which
decide
I
to do
said,
something different, we can do that anyways,
yeah, anytime you want.
which
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
part of my point, because it's already kind of there. I didn't see that there was a need to go and codify it, because we can decide, you know, we really need to fix Port Union. We've got $45 million to do it, so we can.
If I may, another driving force behind amending our code was how can we, as a city, wrap at the table for the Utah Department of Transportation to bring Wasatch Boulevard down to a 35-mile-an-hour speed design, road design, excuse me, if our own city says, hey, arterial's at 50 miles an hour, A-okay. So there was a few reasons to make this immediate change to the code, and that also enters into this, Matt's willingness to jump on this and do this in front of all the other work he has to do related to Code 14, all the rest of Code 14.
Yeah, that's the way I see this. Allowing this language to be in here gives us that opportunity when and if the opportunity comes about. And it's not saying we're going to do anything right now, but
There might be a council that feels the exact opposite.
exactly. But we have the language here.
Might be
to be able to
people that want to
facilitate
widen the
that.
road and go faster.
But the physical, when it comes down to it, the cost is a huge part of it. If we don't
If
take
that ever-
that in consideration, we're kind of being blinded here.
It would
Because-
100% need to work in
Right.
conjunction with UDOT to get
Right.
grants and to do things, because we couldn't do it on our own.
But then you're talking, I mean, what we say for us and ours is fine, but I guess I don't see it as something you
Come on, spit it out.
sending messages to UDOT. I don't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do on the road. And we
Well,
can
clearly
influence
the
them.
previous councils felt that way because this is not a new idea. This idea has been brought to the table over the last 2 years, and the previous council majority felt that there was no credence to it. This
That is not
council
true.
majority,
That is absolutely.
Oh,
not
is it?
accurate. Yes,
okay, well,
that
maybe
is
can
not accurate.
discuss that at a different time.
So I'm gonna move on. So we're gonna go on to 6.5, which is consideration of resolution 2022-20, consenting to appointments to the Architectural Review Commission. And I'm gonna have Tim go over where we are, who's gonna be reappointed, and then the new appointee. So Tim, go ahead.
Yes, we have 3 reappointments that are proposed with this resolution. Scott Chapman, Scott Peters, and Stephen Harmon. They've done a great job for us and continue to want to serve. And so I'm recommending reappointment of these 3 individuals. And then we have another applicant that Mike Johnson and I had the opportunity to interview and meet with. Her name is Zara Hassanapour, and she's very well qualified. You see her background, she's an architect, and we're recommending approval of her being on the ARC as well.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Any questions, comments? I think this commission does a great job. So it's great that we have that expertise in our city, living within our city limits, and we're grateful for their willingness to serve. Next item that we'll be considering tonight is 6.6, consideration of resolution 2022-21, designating areas of our city closed to the discharge of fireworks. And we are going to actually, that's a staff report that we'll get to. We're going to turn that over to Riley here in just a minute. So we're going to pass that one, but that's what we'll be voting on. And then 6.7 is consideration of resolution 2022-22, authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than $7.5 million aggregate principal amount of sales tax revenue bond series 2022 and related matters. So Scott, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So, no, I was just going to answer Councilmember Bracken's question about, on the Port Union land use issue, the zoning conditions. Zoning conditions can only be used for conditional or permitted land uses, dwelling unit density, building heights, for building square footage, not for setbacks.
Great, great. It's good to know.
At some point, one might actually memorize the list.
So we're going to turn the time over to our Administrative and Financial Services Director, Scott Jurgis.
Okay, so the estimate of the building in option one, I'll refer to. The most recent estimate is just under $7.2 million. We have about $1 million of funds, the source being the American Rescue Plan funds, state and local fiscal recovery funds that will be in our possession to help to offset the costs. There's a slight worry that costs could escalate going into the future before we can get things under contract and things. And if that were to occur, we would need to be able to secure additional funding or tap into the general fund in order to cover any escalation. There's an option to be able to set our funding at a level, and then if we don't spend the funds, return those funds back to the entity that would fund us. So what has been discussed in several of the committees that we've had, specifically the budget committee, is to set our funding level at 7.5 million. Preferably, we can still come in at our $7.2 million or less number. And then what funds we don't spend within a year of that time that we have obtained the funding, we would need to return that back to the entity that would fund us. And then we would be able to have our debt service and everything be correspondingly reduced to match that lower funding level. But there is a little bit of, I'll use the term risk, that the cost could continue to inflate as we go over the next little bit because of the unsurety in the market conditions until we're able to actually get into contract. But so the proposal is to have 7.5 million in bond funds available and to put that out over a 20-year period. The hope would be that we would be able to have much less than that, probably around 6.2 million, that we in the end are actually having to have debt service related to. We would owe some interest for that, the amount that we would be outstanding until we returned it, but that wouldn't be too material.
Part of the cost, obviously, interest rates, building costs, materials and everything. Yeah, and timing of when we actually do this, because how many rates are already built in so far?
So we've had one, and there's another one scheduled for the end of the month.
Which we couldn't make that one, is that right?
No, we couldn't, but we could make it
The
before
next one. Yeah.
So this would start a 30-day notice if we approve this, right? Where
That's
we
right.
could actually get a rate locked in within about 30 days.
Yeah. And I believe, Shane, you can correct me, I think that this authorizes the mayor to enter into that agreement once we deem that we have a satisfactory agreement before us at that time to be able to start the process. And we would, of course, keep you informed of what's going on.
This would be the parameters resolution.
Yes.
Great. Any more questions, comments? I know in the business meeting, Ellen will have some. So thank you. Okay.
Well, and part of our reason to go a little higher is just to have, so we don't have to go do it again for a little bit. The other option is to take it down and then just be willing to draw on fund balance if we come up a little bit short when we're actually building the building, which in this case is probably reasonable because it'd probably be 6 figures or so, but there has to be the willingness to do that. And with it being a long-term capital asset, I'd rather match up funds over the use.
We could determine at the time of completion to fund more with our fund balance, right? And return
Yeah, as
Is
long
that-
as it fits within the general scope of what's there, you could utilize those funds. And the million that we're using from the American Rescue Plan, those funds don't have really any specific ties to them. Those could be utilized for a number of different things,
Right.
not even related to the Public Works building. So if there was a desire to repurpose those funds somewhere else and just rely on the bond funds for the building, that would be totally fine. as
Do
well.
that as well. Okay, great.
I'll reserve my comments to the business meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just important to have that little bit of wiggle room because we just don't know what's gonna happen here in the market right now. It's unpredictable. Between inflation and the cost of goods. It would be harder to deal with deficit
Yeah.
than it would be with some additional resources.
Great point. I think we went through, did we go through the building the city hall where we ran into an issue where we had?
Yeah, we thought we had
enough
plenty,
need to-
but the length of time and
Yeah,
we started on the boom that we're in now.
yeah.
And we just ended up a little bit short, so we had to do a little more.
No, great point. That's both of you. Great. Okay, and then the last item for this evening will be approval of our consent calendar, which is the minutes for April 5th. Okay, we will now, we're grateful for our UFA Assistant Chief Riley Pilgrim and he's going to tell us about our fireworks restriction area, which is actually a requirement from the state that we do this every year. So
Yes.
go ahead, Chief Pilgrim.
All right, so thanks for giving us time to do this. I know we're actually, even though it's only April, we're kind of pushing up against the first deadline, which is your declaration, the city's declaration, of the areas that they want to restrict for this upcoming year. And so I have two maps I just kind of like to share with the group just to kind of go over where we were and where we would like to go. Obviously with us, we're always going to advocate for the restrictions. They're important to us. They provide for safety for both the holiday, for the residents, for the first responders, and for everyone who that night, is out there celebrating or having to work. So I'm going to show, last year we're all very familiar with this. Let me get my screen pulled up here. I think we're all pretty familiar with this. We got a lot of feedback on this, whether it was positive or negative. It was kind of all over the place. And a lot of this was in result of concerns with the drought that came up in 2021. And just the issues that we were worried that we would face and that didn't really come to fruition. Part of that was because we believe the restriction worked really well. The other thing, and Chief Russo can even speak to this makes enforcement obviously much easier when it's all red, right? So, and the other effort during this year was a lot of the fire chiefs and the cities decided to have kind of a clear line of demarcation on 1300 East, just so everybody kind of knew this is where the breaks were, right? What we're looking at this year is something that's a little more lenient, and kind of going back to where we've been in the past. Let me see if I can pull this one up real fast. Yeah, a lot going on here, all the Zoom stuff. The new map is this one right here, what I'd like to show. So this is going back to where we were prior to the changes in 2021. So this worked in 2020. We added a few spots that we had some property owners contact us about. This map right here is in line with the current state statute of mountainous or grass covered open areas, anything within 200 feet of a waterway, ravine, trail, anything like that, or an area that's urban interface, which is where homes are meeting the wildland areas. I know there's been some development over the past 2-3 years, and there's been some requests to even look at some of these locations that are restricted that may not need to be. But the current map that Steve Manager Tingy and Melissa, everybody involved, this is kind of where we landed on the proposed restrictions.
So one of the things that this enables us, let's say that we have a really dry second half of spring. We can come in and adjust this and decide that we want to go back to even what
Absolutely.
happened last year.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things to remember is we can put this on here now. It's kind of what happened last year. Then there's a big push as the summer started coming on and the drought concerns became increased. And so there's a big change to the maps after the May 1 deadline, even into June and almost close to the holidays actually, which I think is what caused a lot of the consternation last year. This year, if we get ahead of it, obviously there's the potential that the weather and just the current hazardous conditions, which can be declared by both the state forester and the fire marshal, and we can move towards a more aggressive restriction.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had this map printed up from what came in our packet, but I see that it's different than what you have up on the board in terms of, this shows that there's no restriction there or
There was a
here.
change late
Yeah,
before we got.
Oh, so,
This
so
one might
that
be
is
just a
incorrect.
little
This is accurate, the one on the
Okay.
screen, and we swapped that out. The one on the screen has a couple more areas that were added by the council last year.
bit, yeah.
oh,
There's
so
a data
this is
issue.
pre-2021, so would
Yeah.
this be from like 2020 maybe?
Yeah, that,
Oh, okay.
and we addressed those. We had a lot of people reach out to us who felt like there's a little finger or sliver that they're like, well, man, everyone's doing fireworks around us. We're literally like 2 streets. And there's still a ton of concern here. So
Like
that-
when
that's
you
what
have
changed.
it, oh, thank you very much.
Tim, did you have any thoughts on that or kind of where we are?
Riley, is that Crestwood Park, the large, looks like an
Yes.
anteater or something?
Yeah.
Right.
It is, yeah.
That,
Coming into town?
Yeah, yes, yes. But,
That's it.
I don't know how far it goes. We've got some hills above where our HOA is, and it's that whole hill is an issue. Last year, we were gonna try to get some of the fire crews.
Over from Park,
And that's
Right.
Park, right?
Park Ridge is
Yeah,
right
Park
here.
Ridge.
Right,
It actually
Yeah.
goes out to Park Ridge right there.
right,
And these are down to, there's a row of houses here. I don't
Right.
know if any of it.
right.
We-
That's kind of a hot spot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fire burns uphill really, really fast.
Yeah, and we could pull that within, I mean, it'd probably go just beyond the 200 feet. But those are areas that we need to be concerned with, where anyone in adjacent areas are also able to do fireworks that can be restricted. So we can look at that. The one thing that's important is we want to try to have the clearest line of
Right.
demarcation, right? So people don't get confused. It makes it hard for us and PD to enforce it. When it gets a little
They
confusing
come
like
from
that.
different directions, on the hill, below the hill,
Yeah.
different places. So I really appreciated last year. There was a great, I think, compliance more so than many other cities. And it really did make you sleep a little bit. Every now and then that time of the year, you kind of, if you smell some fire. But no, I think, and it will, like the mayor said, it will be variable. It sounds like that we're going to see in the next month or two what we're going to end up with.
Yeah. So Chief, thank you. I think we'll have you do this again in the
Okay.
business meeting. And then you're also gonna do your quarterly
Yes.
report, which we're looking forward to.
So and if there's any changes, I'll look at the Park Ridge. We can look at that and see if we can pull that and work further. I can work with Tim on that. Then any other areas that may come up between now and May 1st. I think we've hit most of the pockets. Obviously, there's always gonna be a few that we just don't see on there. So we're open to making those changes. Tim, do you have a thought, Tim?
No, I think this covers all the issues that we had prior to last year when there was kind of that more of the emergency element that determined that more of the areas be blocked. So anyway, I think this is a good place to be where we're at. We'll have to reevaluate it in the next month, as has been said.
Well, thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Yep. And then you got a lot more to do, so stay
Yeah.
rested. We are going to go to item B under staff reports, which will be, I'm going to turn time over to our city manager, Tim Tingy. This will be about a discussion about the compensation and benefits committee report. Tim.
Yeah, so all of you are aware, we have 2 committees that really work with it as we move through the budget process. And the Benefits and Compensation Committee has met a couple of times and gone through a variety of different things related to compensation and benefit issues. We appreciate the work of Councilmember Peterson and Councilmember Burrell on looking at some of these issues. What we met in our last meeting, a determination was made. And by the way, also appreciate staff and some of the reports that they've been able to provide and doing the research, Paula and Heather in their area, as we've evaluated compensation and benefit issues. We're kind of at a point where it's a challenging time really understanding what the market is related to cost of living and also merit type increases. I've been having conversations with city managers here in this conference about that as well. What the committee decided was to hold off on a recommendation and continue to go through the budget process until we get a little bit closer to really understand where we should be looking at related to cost of living and other increases related to that. So that is their recommendation on that side of things. We also reviewed health insurance cost estimates. There were a number of proposals that came back, some as high as 19%, down to a variety of different options. The committee recommended an 8% increase, which will raise the deductible for employees up by $100, and then out-of-pocket maximums up to $500 to $1,000. And so that recommendation was brought forward. We've incorporated that into the budget discussion, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But we feel like that is probably the best case scenario for both the city and the employees as far as increases that are going to happen this year for sure. So anyway, I appreciate the input of the committee and Councilmember Peterson, Councilmember Burrell. That's the report I have, and feel free to add anything beyond what I've just said.
Tim, I know that we were going to talk to a lot of other cities because we're all faced with, you know, everything from inflation to healthcare costs. Have you gotten any more data from the other people at the conference so far?
Yeah, I have, and there's a variety of percentages that they're looking at. I mean, some are looking at above 7% on cost of living, some are below, down into the 5 range. And so I'll be compiling those as we move through this budget process and get them to the full council prior to a determination. In our budget documents that you have in front of you with this packet, and we'll talk about it, we put in a placeholder with the cost of living amounts of 7% and then merit increases of an average of 2.5%. But that's just a placeholder. There's no formal recommendation on that, and I'll get more data for you to look at and evaluate prior to your decision.
Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Tim. Councilmember Burrell, did you have anything?
Well, yes, I think that holding off to give this really keen scrutiny to make sure that we really think about what is sustainable and you know, what is obviously fair and viable for all employees, both sworn and the non-sworn employees, but also you know, what the city can sustain going forward. So there's, I think, still a lot of work to be done from our preliminary discussions.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick comment. When I look at these numbers, I can only think about what other considerations are when we look at how we measure up against other cities, in that the level of competition for competent individuals is also rising. And that could, the package that we present to them has to be commensurate of their skill sets so that we don't lose people over compensation. It's a scary place to be right now, but it's something that's very critical to consider.
Important factor. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to item B, which is the budget committee report. And Tim, I'll have you start out with that again.
Okay, same intro. When we start the budget process, and I want to really express appreciation for the hard work of our department heads and putting together some budget estimates and proposals that they submit. We do that back in January and then move that through the process where I evaluate with the budget proposals, and then we bring it to the committee. We've met a couple of times with the committee, council members, Newell and Bracken, and we've gone through all of the elements of the budget, including all of the funds. And we're going to present that to you here in just a few minutes, but appreciate the input and insight and direction and recommendations of the budget committee, as well as we've shaped this budget process. That insight and input has really helped as we've got to this point that we're going to share what we're looking at this point. So anyway, it's a long process involving a lot of different individuals with the department heads and the committee, and then we're going to bring it to you and talk about it here in just a few minutes. But appreciate their input, and I'm council members Newell and Bracken, you can share any thoughts that you had based on the committee meetings as well.
No, I think there's a lot of things that are in here as far as a proposal for the tentative budget. I think it's probably really solid. There's certainly room for discussion, and
Scott's gonna go over all of
right.
that.
And so, at least for now, we'll get our sales tax revenue projection back on something that makes sense.
That's what we're doing.
No. I follow Scott's lead on this, so he's the guru.
Well, great. The
You mean
last,
him, right?
Yeah.
I just want to
I
make
did
sure.
point this.
I don't want to have a, you know.
We'll give you some, but we give you.
item C is our budget discussion, and I'll let Tim start. He's going to introduce it, and then Scott will go through the proposed budget for us. So, Tim.
Yeah. So what we're really working towards is at the next council meeting, the first meeting in May, we will have a tentative budget for your consideration. So today we're going to present the information that the committee looked at and the input that they provided, and then develop this tentative budget, which it's, as Councilmember Bracken said, we're in a pretty good place to have that all prepared. That tentative budget will come for you, and at the next meeting, you'll need to consider adopting a tentative budget, keeping in mind that there's a lot of discussion from that point to the budget adoption, which occurs in the second week of June. And so there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input and comment at that point, and then your consideration. But the tentative budget is what we're really working towards next week. So what we're hoping is, as we go through this tonight, that we'll get your final input, at least for the tentative budget. Once again, keeping in mind that there'll be plenty of opportunity for adjustments and additional input. That tentative budget is an important place for us to be at the next meeting. So with that being said, I think Scott can start kind of walking through. He has a narrative that I've reviewed as well that include the components, and we'll go through that, and as well as the numbers on what we're looking at. Some of the big aspects of this is obviously revenue and where our revenue projections are at. The committee provided some good insight on where to look at as far as our revenue, especially sales tax revenue projections. And then also the expense side of things, the department heads really assisted with that. So we'll go through that, Mayor, if you're okay with doing that at this point.
Absolutely.
All right, so I passed out to each of the mayor and council members the printed copy of this in case you want to take notes as we're going through and things. One thing I wanted to kind of lead on a little bit before we go to this is sales tax, as Tim indicated. This document here, you can kind of see our sales tax. We through January is actuals, and our actuals are in this column here. And then you can see what the prior year's actuals were here. So what I did here is, on this column that I'm kind of hovering over here, is if we were to continue to collect the exact amount that we collected from February forward in our last fiscal year, we would land the year at about $8.5 million, just under 8.5 million.
Wow, great.
Which is a big growth. We're sitting about $600,000 ahead year to date, and therefore it would translate into about $600,000 ahead on the end of the year if we were to do that.
That would be the first time that we'd surpassed property taxes, right?
It would be. It would be. So if we really were to get that, and just because we don't know, obviously, what's going to happen out here into the future. You know, are we going to experience some slowing? I would say we'd probably experience some slowing. I don't know that it's going to go into a recessionary mode, but I think we could experience some slowing of sales tax. It was the committee's recommendation to recommend putting in our projection 8.5 million as our collection for the current year. Now, just to put an outline on that, and is if we continue to collect at our 13.4% rate ahead of the prior year, we would be collecting about $8,951,000
This year.
this year.
Scott, so hold on, so the 2021-22 projection was 8.5? I thought that was 7.5.
So this,
Where you have a really crummy budget number.
yeah, the current projection that we're using for the current year that we're in, the
That you've
21,
updated then.
22, yep, that I've updated, is 8.5 million.
Okay,
We could get, I'm just saying we could get, if we continue to collect about 13.4% ahead, it could balloon up to as much as $8.95 million.
Yeah, the 8.5 is if we go flat,
If we
equal
flat,
to last year. The 8.9 is if we stay on this huge increase.
The likelihood will be somewhere in the middle there, right? Maybe 8.7 or something like that, but having a little bit of cushion is a good thing.
864, 321, market.
But having a little cushion is a good thing from my perspective. For next year, my current recommendation is to be about $8.8 million for our proposal. That is a 3.53 increase over $8.5 million. And if you look at our prior year increases on all these different years that we've had, a 3.5% is more of a, I'll call it a normal year increase in sales taxes. So if things cooled off to be more normal, that would be a normal kind of a level increase in terms of sales tax. Now, obviously, we'll have to keep an eye on this and revisit it potentially, depending on what occurs. And we'll keep our eye on that. We probably will receive later this week our sales taxes for the month of February, and then we'll get a little bit more insight into what's going on.
you and I had a discussion, and the numbers that will come out for March, a month from now, really could probably have the potential to see a slowdown in consumer spending due to the increase in oil prices that hit about then. So we'll watch both of those. February will be interesting, but March will be really interesting.
I think the next 6 months are going to be extremely interesting because of what I've been reading as far as where we're getting hit the hardest. Food and gas, everybody needs that. And it does hit you every day or every other day. And so I'm hopeful it'll see. I remember during the pandemic, we were adjusting our numbers down. I hope we don't have to adjust them in the negative way on this.
Yeah. Well, I think we're probably okay saying 8.5, on the low side. That's assuming we don't go into a recessionary basis comparative to the last year. I do think some slowdown is definitely possible there. I think this is pretty conservative, so hopefully we won't have to adjust downward from here. That's my hope. So again, hopes and dreams, right?
Well, you look at those increases year over year, and last year, that 17 is just so far out of normal. But if you look at what also happened when you start getting the December report of 7 or 8% inflation, it starts to track with that a little bit. That's really high.
One note too is your sales tax will get affected by two things. One is price and one is volume. So if you have an item that costs, let's just say $100, and if that item goes up by 5%, now costs $105.
That's a really good point.
That generates more sales tax because the cost of it went up and the base value is up.
But your volume's going
But
to
you'd
go down
expect
too.
somebody
right?
to.
It could, but you can handle some volume decrease and still remain at an even collection basis. The other thing that affects your sales tax collection is the number of things that come. So not your price, but your volume. So if you used to sell 10 of those things at $100, your base was $1,000 that you're applying your sales tax to. But if you now sell 11 of those things, then again,
that would generate additional sales taxes to you, or in the reverse, if you only sold 9 of them, it could decrease that sales tax. We do have some increases to population within the city. It's not huge. We generally see, a couple hundred a year or something along those lines. But the state as a whole does see population increases, and part of our allocation is based on population. And so as population in the state goes up and the whole collection of sales tax comes in, our population share of that will probably go up a little bit as well. So I think we're probably okay where we're projecting here, but this is obviously the most volatile, revenue that we receive. Everything else is very, it's very tame in terms of how it behaves comparative to the market.
And there's a wonderful council article coming out about it in a couple weeks.
I think you and I talked, Scott, that each household in Utah is spending about $700 more a month for what they were spending for last year at this time. Is that right?
That wasn't with me.
What, maybe it was somebody else then. Somebody told me that
I
it
don't
was
doubt
about
that.
$700 a month difference is what people
Oh,
are
that's breathtaking.
Yeah.
spending right now.
But if that same level of spending were to occur, that extra $700 will generate some sales taxes that will go to things, assuming that everything else stays consistent. Now, obviously, you try and trim your budget when you can, but that would be
Fascinating.
yeah. So switching over into the narrative. So this write-up I outlined last week after we met with the budget committee. We took all the different various spreadsheets that I had and tried to make some sense of it so that it was in a readable format. And again, the goal is to try and get a budget in place that can be out and put on display for the public to review, and for obviously the city council and the mayor to review, as well as staff, as we move forward through this budget process. And it is a process because we've been going through this since really January of this year when we started collecting data, and we've been projecting for even longer, than that. And then we will continue to, refine and project as we go through this, as we lead up to finally adopting a budget, probably on June 21st of this year, as we meet on our second meeting in June. So going through here, this fund balance section, and in what I've sent to you, there's the narrative, and then back a little further, there are the tables that kind of outline each fund. And I might occasionally flip back to a table just to kind of illustrate something that's going on, but I'm going to probably stick to the narrative for a lot of it. So in the general fund, our projected ending fund balance for this current year budget is about $8.5 million. And that $8.5 million reflects an increase of just under $600,000 over the beginning fund balance. So that would be about $2.6 million better than our current year adopted budget. And a lot of that is directly due to sales taxes being much better than we had originally budgeted and expected to come in. 8.5 million would represent about 33% of our current year budgeted revenues. Again, you're required by state statute to have a minimum of 5%. So you can never go below 5% of whatever your revenues are for that year in the general fund. And then our city ordinance requires an additional 1%. So that would be about 256,000. So at 6%, it's about $1,541,000 that we need to keep in our budget. You might say, why does that change every year? Well, our revenues fluctuate. So as they fluctuate, that changes a little bit. We also have a reserve for compensated absences. The current year amount for that is $595,000. And that generally goes up as if you had the same, say 100 hours in there that somebody had and their pay rate went from $10 to $11, the value of that 100 hours would go up a little bit. So as different things happen throughout the year, that can be altered a little bit, but generally it doesn't alter drastically. So that would leave about $6,376,000 available for appropriation at the beginning of this budget year that we have. So you could technically spend $6,376,000 more than the revenues you bring in if you really wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do that if you wanted to, from a budgetary standpoint. Revenues, our property taxes are budgeted at, are recommended to be budgeted at $8.2 million, and this includes an estimated new growth of 50,000. We will actually get the revenue from the auditor once they finish all their calculations that they're going through, and this will happen around June 10th or so. And we'll get that, and that will define what the new growth is. And usually it's been somewhere between $50,000 and $90,000 annually. And that happens by when you have either additions on homes, new homes built, businesses built, additions done to businesses, or maybe even a basement finish, or something that creates new value in the city. That's what creates new growth. If there's not any new growth, then we don't get any new revenues in property taxes. And so that's kind of what's going on. The current certified tax rate is 0.001740, and that is provided by the county auditor. We will get the new rate for that and expect that to drop because property values are going up. So we expect that rate to drop, as we will just be limited to collect the same amount as the prior year. Sales taxes, as we just reviewed, our current budget is 7.2 million, and we're obviously going to be a lot higher than that. We're projecting that now to be upwards of 8.5 million. To be a little cautious, as Councilman Peterson mentioned, we're going to limit our projection for next year to be around 8.8 million at this current time. It could be higher than that. Our current year's collections could be higher than that, but we're trying to be conservative in what we're doing and not over predict our revenues, because that's not a good situation to be in. So anyhow, I won't go on to that, but at any time, if there's questions, please interrupt me and let me know. We currently have a county option sales tax that was voted in by the voters. We had this budgeted at 600,000 even. We're on track to receive 650,000 for the current year. I'm going to recommend that we increase our budget to be at 650,000 for the next year, and this can be used for any transportation, including trails and other things along those lines. Energy use sale tax. This is taxes on your gas and power bills. Currently, we have it built in at $2.2 million in the budget, and that's 250,000 more than our current budget. Again, as rates go up, we receive more funds, and I'm wondering if there was a rate increase on either or what is it now?
Rocky Mountain Power.
Or Dominion. Yes.
Yeah, they changed their name and it's
Yeah,
going back to the old name.
Yeah.
But anyhow, on one of those, because we did notice in our current year's budget, we're collecting a reasonable amount more, about 200,000 more than we typically do.
There was a rate increase.
So yeah, so I was wondering if there was a rate increase that affected that. So that's good that somebody can remember that. So that's where we would recommend that to be, with about $2.2 million. That's about where we're projecting that to come this year, and it's pretty stagnant. It stays about the same level year after year. Fee in lieu is the fees that you pay on your automobile. That's age-based on your automobile. It's not a true tax, it's a fee. And we've got that budgeted at 425,000, and that stays very, very close to that.
So that's the money that's coming from that corridor preservation, correct?
No, this fee in lieu, this is your registration fees on your vehicle that you do,
Right.
General registration.
Right, but I sit on the what do you call that committee? I sit on with the county, and they talked about that's where that money comes from, but it's targeted for corridor preservation.
So that's different money, and we do have some revenues coming in from that. That money flows to the county, and then the county disperses that money out. But it comes from similar when your registration fees, that's an aspect and a layer of your registration fees that comes in on your vehicle. We don't directly get that, but we are in here, we are recommending, we're going to receive a grant on that. I can't remember the amount. I think it's 214,000, something like that we're going to receive on that. Cable TV, there's franchise taxes on that. We receive about 300,000. Every year, it fluctuates just a little bit depending on the cable TV costs on that. But we're recommending 300,000. We have 310,000 in the current budget. Transient room tax, we have had 35,000 budgeted, and we've included, starting this year, we've been receiving closer to 100,000. We didn't adjust that revenue when the new hotel up in the Canyon Center came online. So we're recommending that we increase this to $100,000, and that's just the transient room taxes that are collected on the short-term rentals that throughout the city. And so that's a $65,000 increase.
A question on that. So obviously hotels, as you mentioned, but even though our city in single family residential areas does not allow for short-term rentals within homes, for instance, through Airbnb or VRBO, are there homeowners that are collecting that from their short-term renters and turning that into the city or county or?
I don't specifically know the answer on the Airbnb.
Yes,
We have a couple of legal,
Is that?
there's areas where they're legal, but I do think the illegal ones are paying some sort of tax that bypasses us and goes right to the state. I have heard that
Which,
before.
yeah, that's kind of a fascinating situation that we're in, right? I mean,
Shouldn't the
The
state
money
kind of
should
go back?
come back because if you're identifying the address of the entity properly, it should come back to where it's being generated from. So in theory, because this gets distributed to us from the state tax commission. So in theory, if a homeowner had an illegal, i.e. not zoned properly and permitted from the city rental, and we're submitting that to the state, I believe that those funds would come back to us based on the address of the property, but it doesn't mean that that property would be technically a legal rental. So, but I've never done the investigation on a single property along those lines.
does the state give us a list of the addresses of those short-term rentals like that we could?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't
Have you
know.
ever done an investigation?
It's just, in a January meeting I was in with a bunch of residents, man, they wanted to know how to slow down or stop, these illegal short-term rentals going on.
first one has to get
I will ask
legislature
on
to
that.
allow us to actually find out where they are.
I'll ask if we get, what kind of details we get from that. 'cause I
Thank
don't
you.
actually know.
It's just had a lot of hubbub
Yeah.
amongst my constituents in District 4. So I'm trying to get knowledgeable
Yeah.
on how this really works.
Well, then we could pass it over to police and or code enforcement potentially and, have investigate that.
Yeah.
So we'll look, because I don't know.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, I just wanted to point out that people are worried about the value of their homes. And they think they're going to be taxed incrementally to what their home goes. And we know what that is. That isn't true. But I think a lot of people will find it interesting that only 14% of their tax goes to Cottonwood Heights.
Well, it's not yeah, you're right. Of the whole property tax.
Of the whole
average,
property
yes,
tax,
It's about
right.
14%, yeah.
And that's pretty astounding, isn't it? I mean, most people think that the city's getting the lion's share of that.
It's really the school districts that are
Yeah,
getting. the lion's share.
53% on school alone.
Yeah.
But to do the police, fire, all that, that's pretty amazing on 14%.
Yeah.
Great point, Doug.
Well, and for those who may be listening, as your house, as all those assessed values go up,
The levies.
they reduce the rate that you're taxed at automatically. And so the year to year should pretty much stay the same unless your house is appreciating significantly more or less than the others in the neighborhood.
Mayor, there's two really good articles that are going to be coming up in the newsletter about all of that people can look at.
Great.
I hope to get that before I put my article out because I find that fascinating. And especially since we're right on the low of paying our taxes, that it's on everybody's mind.
Yeah. One will be from our esteemed council member that won't be named yet. So I don't want to
Throw it out.
throw it out
Yeah,
too
yeah.
quickly.
It's a teaser is what it is. It's a teaser.
So telecom, just mentioning in here, telecom franchise tax would generate about 350,000 if implemented. It is not implemented in our city and not being recommended at this point.
We talked about that in the retreat and we're one of the, I think, only cities that doesn't charge this tax, but it's nice to know that is something if we had a shortfall, we could do. Yep. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. So all of these tax types of revenues equal an increase of just over 2 million. So 2,005,000, get the number right. And so that's about a 10.7% overall increase in that group of revenues, predominantly influenced by 1.6 million in sales tax revenues, 250,000 in energy use tax, 50,000 in county option highway sales tax, 65,000 in transient room tax, and then 50,000 in that placeholder for new growth in our property tax. So other revenue changes that we're recommending or seeing is Class C roads funds is budgeted at $1,250,000, and that's just a $10,000 increase. Will be in line a little bit more with what we're seeing reflected in our current budget here. Again, that's based on gallons of fuel sold. So we'll have to watch that if people's habits change in the future. We haven't seen that happen yet, but if people's habits change, we'd have to reflect on that, what's going to happen. And then the last payment, $2,002,000 of the American Rescue Plan Act state and local fiscal recovery funds grant from the federal government will be received around July. We're not sure exactly when that will come in, but that money will come in and then we'll disperse that out. How we've talked about before, which is mainly we're going to utilize for public works building and then for the Keswick Road project and a couple other minor capital type projects that we have budgeted. So overall revenues would be recommended to be budgeted at 25,973,000, so just under 26 million. And that's a $4 million increase from the current year adoption, or an 8.1% overall increase. And that's much of that again comes from we're kind of artificially low in that sales tax. So much of that is there. Any questions on revenues before we move on? Okay. So on the expenditures, overall expenditures, we've tried to keep them in line with our 5-year plan. We've tried to review things that were discussed during the council retreat. We've also tried to review things that were discussed with either the compensation and benefits committee or the budget committee, as well as different things that we've observed as we've gone along. So the police, we did a market adjustment in October of 2021. The total cost of that was $484,000 on an annual basis. We implemented $363,000 of that last year. So we need to adjust for that last quarter of the year. So that's $121,000 increase for that. The cost of living, as Tim discussed earlier, we still have the 7% placeholder in there. And that's because we're not sure what we're going to ultimately adopt. We don't anticipate that being higher than that. So keeping that in there as a placeholder, that's $648,000 based on, and that's again based on the national CPI index that for the period ended December of 2021. Merit, the recommended merit would average about 3.62 for the employees that are eligible to receive it, or for all employees, it's 2.5%. And that just allows people to progress through the range that they have. We have a step plan in place. And so that's a 1-step increase for each employee that would be eligible that's not at the max of that range. Overall impact of this is just over $200,000 if implemented. The healthcare costs, as Tim reviewed earlier, we have it built in here an 8% increase. In order to get that increase, we had to increase the out-of-pocket maximum and the deductible costs for employees. That results in a 68 to 69, really almost $69,000 net increase for that. Dental cost has no change. and that's basically, both are based on utilization of employees. So dental was a reduced utilization. There was a slightly increased utilization by employees on the healthcare costs.
The 8% seems a little high. Is that higher than what we've seen?
For us, in the last several years, it's a little higher. We have been able to hold that below 5% for at least 3 years now. So it's a little bit higher than what we have seen in the past little bit. It's not drastically high. I've seen some that have been up in the double digits, but it is a little high.
Scott, which one was 19% that we looked at?
It was healthcare.
But which one? I mean, was it a lower deductible? Is that what
It
it
was
was?
keeping things the same.
Just static the way it was?
Yeah, it was
19%.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just.
Is
I know it makes you choke.
The provider is Select Health.
Select Health. Yep.
Wow.
So I know with UFA, they have Select Health come in and present. I think I would maybe ask that we do that and maybe have them I think it maybe creates a little bit of accountability to have Select Health come here and meet with us rather than just
So-
tell us what's going to happen, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So we utilize a broker.
That's one. Yeah, ours is Gallagher.
Yeah.
It's Gallagher.
Yeah.
And so they come in and in
Yeah.
essence represent Select Health for that. We could see if they can come in and do that for us.
Okay.
So we can definitely do that. And I'm guessing you're talking in a work meeting like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So we will have to reach out to them and see if we can get them to come in.
I've got that, since you made that comment, I'm making a list of things to look at with that, so I'll make a note of that.
Okay. Any questions? Let's see, let me just summarize. So the total employee-related cost increases from the current budget amount that's recommended and outlined to this point is $1,020,326. So that's what's included in this up to this point. Are there any questions related to these costs before I move down to more operational level costs? So other costs that we have, elections, we have biannual city elections. So we need to remove the 45,000 that we currently have budgeted for city elections. City attorney cost increase. This is a cost of living type increase that we build into the budget each year for inflationary type increases for city attorney costs. Mayor and city council, we added 25,000 for travel and training, and this is directly related to National League of Cities conference back in Washington, DC. It could be utilized for other travel/training purposes if everybody wasn't going on that same conference. Legislative committees increase. There was a recommendation for $1,000 for the youth city council to cover potential inflationary type increases that they see as they go through their different activities that they do. Events, we have a request to add 6,600 to back to Butlerville Days to account for cost increases. This amounts to approximately 10%. And again, we're seeing inflationary type cost increases anywhere between say 3 and 20% in a lot of services and or software things that we contract for in the city. Hopefully it won't need to be spent. That's the caveat that Ann has put in there. I'm trying not to spend it, but just in case she wants to be able to have that available if need be. City manager, there's 30,000 in there to cover some employee range adjustments, and then 5,000 in there to cover code enforcement yard cleanup issues. We had one of those recently that was discussed and think that the outcome of that was good, but we want to be able to have those funds available if we need to be able to do that in the future.
And Mayor and Council, this is something that Chief Russo had recommended. I think it's something that's really important. We can make a big difference in some of the neighborhoods. So appreciate police staff and Chief Russo putting that forward.
In records culture and HR, the only change is an FTE change from part-time to full-time, and that's utilizing a grant to pay for that difference in cost, but to bring somebody in on a full-time basis to allow for a little bit more help in there. And that grant was realized in the budget adjustment that we did early in March at $4,500.
Is that an ongoing grant? Or just a one-time?
Yes, generally yes, it's an ongoing grant. It's a ZAP type grant, which kind of tends to be ongoing. Yeah. In finance and IT, these are really IT increases. There's 58,000 directly related to cybersecurity enhancements, and that was discussed during the council retreat, and I think another time as well. And then there's 39,500 in for inflationary type increases related to software and or hardware that we purchase. A lot of the subscription-based software we're seeing increases on. City Hall maintenance directly in this budget, we didn't see anything. There will be a little bit reflected below in Public Works on some maintenance items.
Scott, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Right now, they're in the process of installing the solar panels.
Yes.
Will that show us, will that give us a break down the road for those electrical fees? I mean, for power?
I am not 100% sure what the agreement is. We did get a grant that covered a lot of that. You know, Mike, on that, will that reduce our expenditures?
Yeah, that offsets. Let's say the wrong number, 65 to 75% of the. That will cover the power costs, and then the return on investment, factoring in the large grant we got, is like 9 or 10 years before we start to see that.
Before return on investment.
Yeah, which is much better than the 30 to 40 years.
Right, because of the grant.
Right.
Right, gotcha, okay.
So I'll review that though with Tim afterwards and also Samantha, just to make sure if we need to make any adjustments in this current budget on that one. Okay. Make a note. Okay, in community and economic development, actually a reduction of 13,000 net. So a reduction of 15,000 related to some contracted services that were tied to the general plan development. And then an addition of 2,000 for training increases in that department. In police, we've got cost increases of 128,100. A lot of that is fuel costs here because of the fuel price being up as high as it is. And then the other item that's really big, excuse me, is the VEC or Versaterm dispatch fees, about $41,000 that we're anticipating.
Is that fairly consistent every year? Are we seeing that number, Tim and Scott? Do you remember?
The last two have been pretty high.
It's higher than it ought to be.
Yeah.
Last year, it was 6 figures, as I believe, right?
I think it was almost 6 figures. Just
Close to
barely,
100
but it
grand.
was really close.
And
Increase.
yeah, but it was sold to us as the previous director had all these shortcomings. I'm just coming in, I got to bring it up. We found all these things. Just give us the 100,000 in West Valley. I mean, some of these guys got $500,000 increase depending on their size.
Trust us.
You just do it, and then you can count on a 2% increase every year. Well, that's not what happened. You can see we got hit with a $41,000 increase this year.
What percentage is that, Chief?
It's more than 2%.
It's probably around a 10% increase on that thing.
That's about right. Yeah,
But,
but I think we just need to be really diligent. I mean, it's going. I know what the money's going to, and there's some things that are necessary. And I'll tell you what part of the problem is, and that is this. We had a bond on the building, and we're paying the bond every year. The idea is when the bond is completed, we'll put the money, whatever that number is, into a fund for maintenance. Well, the bond got paid off, and no one can tell me where that money has been going for the last several years. It just got absorbed into operations, and no one caught it. So that number is not a 6-figure, it's a 7-figure number. Anyway, so now that we're trying to fix part of that, we should be.
Can we get access to those numbers, or is that?
We've asked several times, and you'll get a lot of different answers and finger pointing as to the previous administration did this, that, but it's a lot of money. I mean, the number that they last told me was somewhere around $3 million.
3 million. And it kind of vanished.
Well, it got absorbed in
Yeah,
operation.
absorbed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is.
Especially when we have some problems with that on occasions.
So,
Fascinating. Okay.
So the next
So-
item.
yeah, no, we just need to be,
Yeah.
ask the right questions and make sure that we watch that very carefully, that part.
Yeah. So the next item is 19,000 on a police wellness program. This is, what do you want to say, counselor to come in and talk with the police?
Yeah, we talked about this. We hire a licensed clinical social worker. She comes in and sees everybody in the department at least twice a year, including myself. And part of, when you talk about de-escalation and police violence and those kind of, it starts with the wellness program of the officers, and we lose nationally 5 times more officers a year by their own hand than those killed in the line of duty. And then we lose so many more to alcoholism and other diseases because of the type of work they do. So she comes in and she sees everybody, and hopefully we gain a better officer, we get a better product. The officers love it. They embrace it. I wish we could have her more at our statewide conferences and national conferences. This is a trend throughout the nation, so that we don't have issues that come forward where, it's not just training, it's maybe we didn't catch a problem early on.
Were there some state grants for this program or a similar
Not
program?
that I know, there's only 3 of us
Okay.
in the state that do this. There's Salt Lake City, West Valley, and Cottonwood Heights, all the cities. So
Great.
We could tell them all about it, right?
Say that Citizens Academy has been very valuable.
did she speak?
What's that?
Did Mariah speak? Or did they just talk about
I don't
Well,
think Ryan
we
did.
heard all about it at
Yeah.
the Citizens Academy, and it was, I think, more testimonials from the officers.
Right.
Did the social work, I don't remember if she spoke. but-
I've heard about it. I don't know if it was in those meetings, but I've heard a lot about this, and we've talked about the situations our officers go through because of what they see and what they've been through. And I think it's very valuable. When you see the numbers of the problems that you go through in your life because of what you see on a daily basis.
the average officer has a lifespan of 17 years younger or shorter than average white male in the United States. And we have a very high divorce rate, very high alcoholism rate. And so it's not just that they see them
Right.
twice. If they're involved in a critical incident, a shooting, they see the death of a child, whatever it is. And fire does the same thing with us. And I
Yeah.
imagine they have something similar in place. We make the individual see.
Work through it,
Before we put them back on the road. So it's,
Very valuable,
I think so.
especially Ellen. She got shot in her training.
Yeah, but I learned how to hold the gun and do the whole.
The difference is, you'll actually walk away from that.
Yes,
You know,
yes, that's a lot less stress.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
So moving along, so the DARE funding was formerly covered by a grant of 4,000. We're asking that, and that provides the supplies that they utilize for the program with the students. Several software items have increased about $10,000. Lexipol iPhone, adding that to the iPhones and allowing them to do some training from the phones and so on and so forth, $8,500 increase. The Axon redaction software for different video and other things that need to be done. And then increased diversity and de-escalation training at $7,500. In the ordinance enforcement area, there's some increases related to both veterinary costs for the animals that we get and also for the shelter costs. As we're seeing increases specifically at Sandy City on this particular one, we use their shelter. Emergency management, $6,300. That's a combination of the command post maintenance and also tires for the command post, and then some software increases there for some of the software they utilize. For fire, we have a placeholder of $3,054,000, which is about an 8% increased placeholder, and this is their 7% COLA option. And we're waiting to have a final meeting from fire to see what that will be at. We'll probably get this in May sometime, So we can hopefully get that figured out. Shouldn't be higher than that though. Public Works, there's a net increase of 20,000. Some minor equipment changes at $326, and then some traffic calming and radar or radar signs that are traffic calming, net of some other reductions of about 20,000. So overall, the expenses are recommended at $20,542,000. That's an increase of 1.7 million on the expense side. And then, so there's a summary down here through here of all the different increases, but we've already gone through them, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over it again. And then there's transfers from our general fund, because that's how we fund our other funds. So 2.7 million that we've talked about before, going for public works related capital projects in our capital projects fund. And then another $1,029,000 that is coming from the American Rescue Plan Act that we're going to kind of earmark for the public works building. A total capital projects fund of 3.7, almost $3.8 million. The debt service fund, there's $1,826,000 being transferred over there, and that's for land and buildings, police vehicles, and public works vehicles bonds. And then finally, $200,000 to go to the Stormwater Fund to cover the difference between the fee and 1.6 million in overall funding needed in that fund. Sorry, trying to find where I'm at in here. Stuff I want to look at. Capital, and so anyhow, the overall, so changes outlined in the general fund is 1,202,000 of use of fund balance. So that's our expenses and our transfers out being higher than our revenues. We actually anticipate that we would see about 775,000 in under expend for the year. So that would bring that much lower. But our budgeted ending fund balance would be 7,311,000. That would be 28% of the budgeted revenues. We're within that limit of 35% outlined by state statute. Again, our requirements would be about 1.3 million for the 5%, 260 or so thousand for city ordinance, for 1,558,000. And so the reserve for compensated absences at our current year booked rate would leave about 5,157,000 available to be appropriated at the end of June 2023, if the desire was there to do that. Capital Improvements Fund, we start this with 96,000 available for appropriation at the beginning of the year that haven't been specifically assigned to a project. We have $3.7 million coming in, and that includes the county option transportation. This is actually 650,000 now. There's all kinds of things that have trickled through, and I catch most of them all the time as I'm going through.
That's the quarter.
Yeah, and then the quarter funds are the 400,000 here. So that go in. So that's about $1 million of the net. And then there's an additional transfer of 1.7 million from the general fund. Most of that is related to the Class C roads revenues that come in. American Rescue Plan Act, state and local recovery funds, $1,029,000 to go towards the cost of the public works building. And then we'll be entering into a new lease for the public police and also public works light duty vehicles. And it's anticipated that the net upfront cost would be about 2.7 million for those vehicles. And we'll detail that in the next meeting a little bit more. We're projecting 214,500 in the corridor preservation funds that this comes to us from the county with a corresponding project for that. And then just 25,000 in interest revenues that we receive approximately. So the funding is 2.7 million for our public works building. That's outlined below. So city striping, roadway projects, environmental for the Bengal Boulevard Highland intersection, some sidewalk projects in here, 1700 East, 2700 East, some ADA ramp projects to be able to be completed, and then the sidewalk 50/50 program, as well as some hazard mitigation where they grind down the high levels on the sidewalk transitions. Fence projects, about 50,000. We've got a couple of fences that need some repair that are city-owned fences. And then we will eventually have to re-budget projects that we don't complete during the year. We will know that number in about September or October, and we'll take care of that. But that doesn't take any new funds. Those are just funds that we've already transferred in. That, like I mentioned before, the corridor preservation grant, 214,000. And there could be some additional trails type related projects that again get rebudgeted as we go throughout the year. The police vehicles, 2.7 million, and public works vehicles. And then the public works building.
That number is just the lease proceeds are still.
That's the upfront cost of purchasing those vehicles. It's not the debt service of that.
Not the residual back on.
No, the residual back's about 1.3 million that we get from the old vehicles that we sell. And that comes into our debt service fund. So overall, it means that we'll end the year with about $1,021,000 available for appropriations. And at the end of the year, and so we'll be able to look at that and see. And if there's minor projects that come up during the year, we can utilize these funds to cover those projects as we go along.
With the current cars that are going off lease, was there any adjustment made to the residuals due to the current market conditions or not?
There's not, because we're entered into an agreement at the time of the lease that showed exactly what we would be receiving. The new lease anticipates.
And we didn't have an option to just buy them ourselves.
I don't know directly off the top of my head. We'd have to review that.
It might be worth looking at the resale value and then.
I mean, that's a
what
lot,
if
that's
we
a lot
purchased
of
them and resold them.
administrative overhead
Yeah.
to handle ourselves.
Still might be worth it.
But we wouldn't retain them. You're saying that we would take them and resell them? Is
It's
that what
just
you're
right
saying?
now, the market's really weird, right?
People.
But we also have, maybe we're getting a better residual this time around.
I know that the current shows that if the market changed, that from what the projected, at least on the new lease that we're anticipating going into here, that if the market changed drastically from what it is, let's say that they anticipated selling the vehicle for $20,000, but the market changed upwards, then we would be able to share in that market increase that would be there.
And it's up only.
I don't know the answer to that. So because I haven't seen the agreement. I've only
Did you
heard
say
it
on the
verbalized.
upside and the downside?
And that's what he wasn't sure. That's what I asked.
Okay, that's what
I
I
mean,
thought.
I'm fine, and that's okay. I understand, that
Typically, if
many
you want
cars
to
trying to.
share in the upside, you got to share in the downside
Right.
too. So we'd have to look at that. So.
And it's variable.
May I just ask quickly, back on the environmental for Bengal Boulevard Highland intersection at 90,000. Is that, I'm a little confused. That obviously isn't talking about the roundabout. Is that talking about the bike lane that would
the
swing
redesign of
through?
that intersection that's coming through the process.
Okay, so we anticipate in this next
is it,
fiscal
5?
year that we'll spend about $90,000 on that project in this budget year. Is that how that works? Maybe Mike Johnson
That'd be
or Matt,
That'd be Matt.
can you answer that? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to hang with
That's a
this.
project we received a grant for about 3 years ago for improving the intersection for bike, pedestrian and traffic.
Yeah, I remember you presenting that in January,
Yeah,
so
that's-
this would apply to
That
getting that
applies to that
going.
intersection.
Got it, thank you.
When is the actual
The fiscal funds become available in October of this
Really?
year, yes. Yeah. This is why we need to get this done now. This is the environmental plus about a third of
There
the
was some
design.
time coming, but okay.
Is there time enough, Matt, from October to our weather year, let's say?
No, that's just the money's available to
So take
move
care
forward.
as soon as we
This
can
is all
spring.
preliminary work we have to do before we can get the final money for design.
Gotcha.
Any more questions on the capital project stuff?
No.
Okay. So in the Stormwater Fund, we've got, so this was created in June of 2021, and it's to cover expenses related to the stormwater maintenance and capital expenses. So this proposal keeps the revenue at $7.50 per month per ERU. And the idea is to limit spending so that we have about $500,000 of unappropriated funds in there at any given time. So if we ever had an emergency project pop up, we wouldn't have to scramble to the general fund to fund it. We'd be able to look to this fund to be able to cover any repairs that would be on an emergency basis. So the Stormwater Fund is projected to have about $232,000 available at the beginning of the fund year. Revenues are expected to be $1,400,000 area. Again, we originally anticipated that to escalate at about 3% per year going forward, but we will review that, and that will have to be approved by you if we did any changes to any billing rates in any future years. Transfers in are about $1,028,000, so that's $200,000 to get us kind of keep that fund whole, if you will, at about $1,600,000 net funding, as well as $828,000 that's directly related to the American Rescue Plan Act, state and local fiscal recovery funds, specifically for the Keswick Road Stormwater Project. So overall expenses would be about $674,000. That includes $615,000 of personnel costs, and that's for operations and maintenance type costs, and then $35,000 for curb and gutter repairs, $35,000 for some cross gutters where we need to take water from one side of the street to the other, and then flushing out stormwater manholes and inlets and so on and so forth, about $594,000, and $828,000 for that Keswick Road project. So that all in all would be an increase of $232,000 to the fund balance, which would push that net ending fund balance to about $500,000 at the end of the year. Again, for that, just in case we need to utilize it, fund as we move forward. CDRA fund has a projected ending balance of $1,358,000. This is the second year. This will be the second year. We're in the first year, and this will be the second year of the tax increment financing on the Canyon Center parking project. Again, $10,000 in revenues based on interest. $584,000 is the plan. This came from the original plan of $584,000. Well, this will have to be trued up based on what we receive, as we don't really know what the distribution will come in. It's based on the relative values in the given years. Expenses, $10,000 for miscellaneous professional fees that we might need for CDRA projects. And then that same revenue that comes in up here, we would expect to disperse that revenue out to various entities, ourselves included, as we move through the process of doing that. And again, we'll true that up when we know that. And that would leave that same $1,358,000 in there available for Fort Union and Cottonwood Corporate Center redevelopment areas. And again, we've talked about that and possible uses for that in the past as well. Debt service fund, we just have a minimal amount in that fund available at the end of the current budget year. There's also funds in the escrow fund that we utilized to pay off the 14 and 16 bond when we did our refunding in October. So expenses are anticipated to be, and these are all pretty much set by debt service schedules, $338,000 for police, $1,356,000 to pay off the police vehicles, and that comes from the sale of the current police vehicles. $310,000 for public works vehicles, and this is the current vehicles that we have. Building bonds from the general fund transfer 2014, 16, and 21 of $1,177,000, and then building bonds that will be paid for from the escrow funds for the 2014 and 16 of $545,000, and then we put in just $500,000 of miscellaneous expenses because every once in a while there's a random little amount, and we don't want to have a discrepancy in our expenses on that. Then revenues and transfers, 3,442,000. So the transfer in from the general fund of 1,826,000 to cover various debt service. Interest that will come on that escrow account of just under $260,000. Proceeds from the sale of the police vehicles at 1,356,000. And then again, a miscellaneous 500, just so we don't go over budget on anything. At the end, we would see a decrease of 285,000 in our escrow funds. And that's utilized to pay off the debt service, and that's anticipated in all the funds that we did and the debt service schedules that we have. And that will keep that available for appropriation balance of $673 at the end of the year. And we'll keep watching that. If that ever becomes significant, we'll look at transferring that back to the general fund. So in summary, at the end there, we have the COLA amount that we will need to firm up in terms of what we want to do on that. What's included in here is the 7% amount. That's a placeholder till we can figure out what we want to do with that. We've got to get the final UFA contract price, which could result in some additional savings to the general fund, depending on where that's settled at. And then we will get the final certified tax rate and corresponding property tax revenue off of the new growth. That will be available around the 10th of June, so we won't have that prior to adopting the tentative budget.
What is our tax rate this year?
0.001740, I think. It's on that first page.
Oh, really? I thought that was 21. That's not.
14700. That's the 21. We don't know what it is until we get the certified tax rate in June. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
That's the most current one. Got
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
And
I keep
so.
forgetting they run on a different calendar.
Yeah. So we won't know that until June. And then we're anticipating that this budget would be finally adopted on June 21st. It must be adopted by June 22nd, according to state tax statute. And, we think that this is pretty good. Again, any comments that you have, we'll take into consideration. And any comments, once it gets put out for a tentative, we'll take into consideration as we move forward. And there are the actual fund balance schedules, fund summaries behind there that for each of the different funds that we have. Any questions?
We did this all day long, huh?
It gets to you some days. So that's why sometimes when you ask me a number, I'm like, let me check, because I go through a lot of numbers.
I like little bits and
Yeah.
You're good. Thank you, Scott. We're grateful. You can see the
Yes.
amazing job that Scott does. So thank you. And we'll look forward to continuing this process and getting it done. So great. So we are going to move on to our review of calendars and upcoming events. The Cottonwood Heights Shakeout is Saturday, April 23rd. I would highly encourage you to put out a ribbon on Friday night. They come by and they look and see that if there's a ribbon there. And I just would highly encourage you to participate, your neighbors, talk to them. I know that the process is really, really fun. I've been involved in it a lot. I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to make my daughter put up a ribbon on my door. So I hope that you will, and encourage others to do so as well. The Wasatch Business Series Spring Meeting is on Thursday, April 28th at 4 to 6 at 8 Settlers Distillery. We all know where that is. There's an Arts Council photography class on Wednesday, May 11th here at City Hall. Another Arts Council photography workshop. That's a misstatement. It's on Saturday, May 14th at 6:30 at the Old Mill Park. And then an Arts Council photography show is on Monday, May 6th, and that's all day here at City Hall, which we call. And then obviously the Cottonwood Heights Public Road Days on July 28th to the 30th. We do not have anything scheduled for a closed meeting this evening. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our work session and move to our 6:30 business meeting at 6:30.
And we adjourn the work session and come back for business meeting.
I second that motion.
A movement and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?